The Spartan war against Lugos had reached a turning point. Kronos might be the main source of income, but the locals possessed an even more crucial skill. They had the ability to make outstanding armor for not just the Spartan troops, but also their horses. Sarmatian cataphracts, the once powerful phalanx of old, has been replaced by a tactic of their new land. Rightfully so, as that was their only chance to survive in these harsh environments. King Akritatus is almost 40 years old now and has accomplished nothing in the eyes of his fellow Spartan fugitives. But that is not true. His superb administration skills was the only reason these barbaric tribes haven't rebelled against us. Plus, he also had a responsibility to educate his children. So far, Eugenius, the heir to the throne, was the only one learning the advantages of a silver tongue. He simply didn't have enough to pay for an education for all the others. Most of the Spartan treasury had to be spent on military and logistics. How else were they supposed to outmuscle the foul Germans? However, there was some good news in the fact that the Lugos made a tactical retreat back into their own lands. Towards the Black Sea perhaps. There was only one way to find out. Diodorus marched east as reinforcement to Galenus, who eagerly wanted to raid the enemy town. Spartan numbers might only count for a small estimate of their total strength, but they would act as polemarchs throughout the army, leading the local levies into battle. Of course, there was no surprise in how the Sarmatian lured out the garrison into the open field and pincered them. So much blood. Just like with the northern town Kronos, Galenus decided to rename his new conquest. On this occasion after himself, almost. I mean, how arrogant could he be? I know he is the most elite strategist of all the Spartans, but to name a city after himself, is he comparing himself with the titans of old? He better be careful, the wrath of Zeus doesn't strike him down. Galenus also demanded rearrangements of the daily duties in the town. It did have a large source of hide in the region, unnoticed by its former occupants. A valuable resource that increasingly heightened the value of Spartan trade. But being landlocked didn't help. Gaining access to a port was a must. The Spartans had two options. Rugi, placed on the coast into the Baltic Sea. It was perfect for trade. Maybe we would even discover more people to trade with. Yet this meant going to war with the Suevos, something we desperately have tried to avoid. Still, with our current strength, it could be possible. On the other hand, that would lead to yet another war on another frontier. The second option is through the deep woods, over the dense layer of snow, followed by attrition, past the Lugos forces, who undoubtedly prepared ambushes at this very moment. And finally, when all of that is over, attack the two towns still under Lugos control. It will be costly. Losing a lot of men in this endeavor is undeniable, but it will always be better than declaring war on yet another front. At the beginning of this journey, it looked like the path was clear. Only minor stragglers to worry about. So easy in fact, Galenus took his reinforcing cataphracts and marched out without scouting ahead. And by some miracle, he walked straight past an ambushing Lugos army. They had probably drunk too much wine before our arrival. The wolves howled throughout the night. With everything going so well, the biggest self-caused mistake occurred. The Spartans could either be pincered here, or risk Galenus being snatched back by Lugos. Diodorus was still on his way, yet not close enough. And somehow, the biggest blessing from all the gods saved us. Nothing happened. Were they still drunk? That hangover must be massive if that's the case, because it lasted 3 months. But now, the Spartans were stuck in between two Germanic forces with another one on its way. They could have gone for the head and taken out their towns, while Diodorus possibly could have defended our lands. No, it was too risky, especially with the winter on its way and the journey still long. Instead, he heroically slaughtered the drunk forces and returned back to safe land. A choice the god of war Ares seemed to enjoy. So much in fact that he gifted the Spartan army with exceptional training, allowing them to recruit elite hoplites. No one truly understands what happened, and it probably won't happen again. But what a good surprise this was. Hoping it would give an even further advantage in battle, Galenus didn't wait for the snow to pass away. His lust for glory precedes the safety of his men, which he once held so dear in his mercenary campaign in Thrace. When thinking about it, he is acting just like Alexander the Great, right before the gods punished him. In spring, the Spartan forces drew out into a long march through the woods. This time with no ambush, just them standing on an open field taunting us for battle. With the blessing of Ares and the elite Sarmatians on our side, we obviously accepted the challenge. Of course, we wouldn't just waste our new Spartans. Instead, we would keep them in reserve, letting the levies intercept the first charge. Most of our cavalry would run to the enemy left flank, seeking to engage the enemy horse archers. But knowing a straight-up shooting contest could devastate our numbers, we decided to pincer them between our own horse archers and the cataphracts now approaching from the forest. Eventually, the Sarmatians caused enough damage for the enemy general to deal with the situation. However, he quickly realized his mistake and retreated back behind his lines. Not that it would keep us from pursuing him. It is impossible to survive a charge from well over 300 cataphracts and armored lancers. Without a general to lead them, the Germanic forces charged straight into our levies in a hail of javelins and arrows. Once the levies broke, it was down to the Spartans to stand firm until the Sarmatians could arrive. Just like before our exile. If you ever wondered how we knew the difference between the Spartans and barbarians, just go for the smell, or away from it in this case, as they reek of inferiority. Holding their ground was easy, by the way, especially as it didn't take long for the Sarmatians to return, giving little care to the routing troops ahead of them. And we all know what happened next. After his heroic victory, none could stay in the path of Sparta. It was time to eliminate all their enemies one by one. All these victories made the soldiers incredibly loyal to him, which undoubtedly was a concern for the Spartan king Acritatus. But what could he do? He was forced to stay back while Galenus gathered more fame and gravitas than any other. Maybe he was the most famous general in the world. Perhaps he was right in naming a town after himself. The Darki, a friend of our many enemies, had formed an impressive force at our border. Diplomatic actions to ease them was impossible. We could only hope for them to stay neutral in this conflict a bit longer. And although they might be impossible to work with, Bosporus, a former Greek colony, now turned empire, entered our line of sight. Ruling most of the north and eastern Black Sea coastline, all the way down to the foreign lands of Armenia actually. They could be an exceptional ally in our war against Rome, or an even more formidable foe. Acritatus secured a non-aggression pact with them, and learning from their past, he even demanded a substantial sum of gold as insurance for their allegiance. Finally, the overlooked king could show how his skills could be useful. Not as a fighter perhaps, but maybe with etiquette and persuasion. The gold was instantly invested into improving both hide production and housing. Diodorus, who slowly proved himself just like Galenus did in the past, finished off the remnant Lugas army to return back and guard our territory. But the main Spartan army headed straight for Divide Et Impera. It was a race against time, as their new ally was attempting to take it for themselves. And when they asked for assistance in an assault on the town, Galenus refused. They weren't his allies. The Spartan general showed his rebellious behavior for the first time. Nevertheless, it doesn't change the fact that the garrison was so weak. Most of them surrendered by the sight of Galenus and his army. All this land was under his command. Maybe he was planning a civil war. Let's hope not. Not now, when the Daraki declared war on Sparta as well. And that we couldn't afford. But what we could afford, although in another category, is to make Budorgis, our new capital, into a proper metropolis. Or at least to begin giving it the possibility to become one. Our many conquests even cleared a path for a straight trade route to Bosporus. We gave them amber and hide in return for gold and wine. A perfect agreement that doubled our export value. Once we take Olbia, which finally is within our grasp, this current number is gonna be nothing. Once the winter had passed, it was time to make a bold attack on the final Lugar stronghold. After yet another heroic victory, the port was ours and the Lugars finally gone. This province needs to be made into a food province, so there is plenty of work to be done. With Olbia came the access to sea trade and news of all the events that took place in Greece since we left. Basically, right after we abandoned Italy, the Romans wasted no time in getting rid of our liberated Samnite allies and took full control of their lands again. After that, they made several attempts at reaching Apollonia, but failed due to the Spartan fleet. However, after almost a year of holding out, the fleet disbanded, seeking refuge in Macedon, allowing the Romans to conquer the harbor. Their endless legions continued their expansion into Larissa and all the way down to Athens actually. A big mistake, as this drew in the Macedonians. Their armies, led by the Spartan generals, broke the siege, captured Larissa, and forced the Romans back to Apollonia. The city of Sparta itself still stood untouched, plagued with squalor, but untouched. Probably the best news we could have gotten all year. Ares must have protected them. After the failed invasion of Greece, the Romans set their eyes upon Carthage. Many invasions were made, and I truly mean many. All failed. Most likely due to them not having fully recovered from our own invasion of their land. The Macedonians took this time of peace to annex the Thracian tribes all the way out to the Black Sea. Odessa was only subjugated. But this left them vulnerable for the other successor states, something they were eager to exploit. As Seleucid armies marched towards Greece, so did Rome, whose interest had returned towards the Hellenic world once again. A terrible situation that needs Spartan aid. We must come to their rescue. It was time for Acritatus to shine. He formed defensive alliances with Carthage and Macedon, as they had proven to be worthy foes of Rome. Furthermore, he established a whopping 11 new trade deals. They now imported salt iron dye, horses, and much more. This pleased the populace of Sparta, making him almost equally as popular as Galenus, possibly even more. And all the gold. Sparta was undoubtedly the wealthiest nation in the Black Sea. For a time, until it all was spent. In a good way, he secured our western border with his Swaipos in Cimbri, began expanding the amber mines, even built a slave trader to increase the Helot workload. It was finally time to reintroduce them into our society. Best of all is, he could finally pay the education cost for all his children. The future of the Agiad dynasty was saved. How proud the former King Ares must have been. As we sent out scouts into Dacia in preparations of our expansion south, we saw a Celtic army moving towards us. Through the backing of Rome, they had become the main powerhouse of Illyria. If we want to save Greece, they must be defeated first.